I owe an apology to my grade 7 home ec teacher. Like I already mentioned, I owe an apology to my grade 7 home ec teacher, Mrs. Rogers. Let me explain. When I took her class, I was a 13-year-old boy, and I didn't think home ec was a topic that a boy really needed to know. After all, cooking, cleaning, and sewing were women's work. At least that's what I thought at the time. I never took her class seriously. I used to screw around all the time. I probably got sent to the office about twice a week. I rarely got any of my projects done, and I pulled all kinds of silly and stupid pranks, mostly offensive pranks, all the time. The worst prank I ever pulled was when I made a bunch of girls from another work group cry after I defaced their kitty cat cake. You see, I made this life-size cock out of cookie dough with huge balls, and I used chocolate sprinkles for the pubes. Yeah, kind of like this one. At the end of class, I snuck it into the fridge and I placed it right on top of their cake and then closed the door. The girls discovered it the next day when they were supposed to present to the class, and they broke into tears. It was hilarious. Hilarious at the time. The girls were so upset they were rushed down to the office to see the school nurse, and some of them got sent home for the day. Hindsight being 20/20, I look back at that and I think to myself that was a really bad thing to do. It was malicious and it was very, very mean-spirited, and I really regret doing it years later. No one knew for sure if I did or not, but they strongly suspected. Back then I was a mean little bastard. I loved to disrupt everything. I loved to destroy other people's property. Kind of like the Occupy crowd or the Montreal protesters of today. Total douchebags. Even though I was a bad kid, Mrs. Rogers never failed to teach me something new every day, even though I thought it was bullshit at the time. But in hindsight, cooking, sewing, budgeting, shopping, and cleaning up after yourself are important skills. The one skill I thought was stupid for a boy to learn was sewing. I mean, you can find a woman like your mom or your aunt to do that for you, right? Well, Mrs. Rogers taught me to sew by hand and with a Singer sewing machine. And one of the projects we had to do in her class was make a stuffed animal. I never got mine finished. I started making a stuffed plush soccer ball. And because I procrastinated so much and never finished it, I got a big fat 0 for a mark. And back in those days, you could actually fail a class. Not like the bullshit, weak-ass education had today where they don't want to leave any children behind because their self-esteem might be hurt. Pfft. So now we're being inundated with left-wing indoctrinated retards with no skills who are going to probably live with their parents forever. Anyway. Later that year, I actually ended up finishing that soccer ball with the skills that Mrs. Rogers taught me, and I gave it away as a Christmas present to my little cousin. It was starting to sink in that maybe she was right, that sewing was an important skill. Now, fast forward to the 90s, and it was a time where I wanted to buy myself a rucksack, but couldn't afford to drop the amount of cash that I wanted to on that bag. So I got some olive drab material from a camping store, and also got some thread, straps, and buckles from a fabric shop. My girlfriend's mom loaned me her sewing machine, and then I went to work at making a crude but a pretty effective rucksack for my first time out. A few years later, I got my own industrial sewing machine, and my work got better and better with the more projects I made. So today I have a hobby that I use to make extra money. I make military gear and I sell it to army guys. I make backpacks like this one here, as well as chest rigs, pouches, and other stuff. If Mrs. Rogers hadn't taught me to sew on a Singer sewing machine, I wouldn't have this small money-making venture that I use to supplement my income and pay my bills. To her, I owe a very sincere apology for being such a shit in her class. I also owe her a debt of gratitude for not giving up on me, even though she probably hated me intensely at the time. Today, I still use the various skills she taught me, even though at the time, I saw no use for them. And thank you, Mrs. Rogers. You taught me well, even though my marks didn't reflect it. And I hope you're enjoying your life somewhere nice, peaceful, without any shit pumps causing you any grief. What? Don't judge.